everyone, how's it going? So I'm in the middle of a bookshelf that I'm building right now, and I wanted to stop and do a video specifically on the DRAWBORE Mortise and Tenon joint. It's a really cool joint, it's really strong, and I think you guys should start incorporating it into your own furniture too. So without further ado, let's get building. Alright, so I already have my tenon laid out. I'm going to start by cutting the tenon. Very simple. I just measured how deep I wanted my tenon to be. Used a square. Took a marking gauge, marking knife, and marked all four sides. And I just built this little jig, or this guide I should say, and it works really nice. It's basically just a scrap piece of wood that I had. Put a couple rare earth magnets in it, and then sandpaper on one side. And I'll line it up perfectly with my line so that the line just disappears. I'll just hold it down with my hand, and the magnets will suck the saw. It'll be perfectly vertical, some gentle strokes until the saw kerf is established. It's a perfectly straight cut. Alright, so now I'm going to cut cheeks. One quick tip that really helps me cut my lines like this a lot straighter is to do it on angles. You kind of start in one corner and follow the line or the knife blade or the mark that you have down one face, and then start bringing your saw back and then doing the other corner, and then go across the top, and you'll get a much more consistently, you'll get a nice straight cut. Now I'm just laying out my mortises on the feet, basically just putting a line closest to that sloped edge and actually using the side pieces themselves to strike the other line. And then making my mortises a 1/4 inch narrower on each side, because that's the width of my tenons. And then I found the center line, and I'm extending a line a 1/4 inch from each side of that, so that my mortises will be 1/2 inch. It's really convenient to make your mortise and tenons the same width as whatever chisels that you have. So if you have a 1/2 inch chisel, then it makes a lot of sense to make your mortises that wide so that it's easier for your chisel to get in there and do that work. I started with a drill press and hogged out a bunch of material, and now I'm just taking a chisel and slowly working the rest of that material away. Okay, now I'm going to do a little test fit to make sure everything's fitting good, and it is. It's fitting beautifully. And now what I want to do is spend a second and do a little diagram and show you guys how this joint really works. A drawboard mortise and tenon is when you drill either one or multiple holes into the board with the mortise in it. You don't drill it through the board with the tenon in it yet. You're going to take this board out and you're going to drill an offset hole. Sometimes people will just drill a hole all the way through both the mortise and the tenon and peg it, and that provides some additional mechanical advantage to the joint to help it not pull out. But the purpose of draw boring is it really pulls the joint really close together. Now I'm going to start laying out the locations for where I want my dowel holes to be, and I'm going a 1/2 inch away from the edge of the tenon. If you go any narrower than that, you risk weakening the tenon and it breaking when you're driving the peg through. So you need to really think about that when you're laying out these holes, so that any of those holes aren't too close to a certain edge. Now I'm also laying one of these holes out at 1/2 inch and the other one at 3/4 inch to kind of give it a little aesthetically pleasing look. It's a good idea when you're drilling through an open hole like that, like a mortise hole, to put a piece of scrap wood in the middle of there so that when the drill bit comes through it doesn't break out on the inside. Now with the two pieces reassembled, you're going to take a brad point bit that's exact same size and put it back into the hole and tap it just a little bit. It'll make a little mark on your tenon. Now you'll take an awl and move that mark towards the shoulder around a 1/16 to an 1/8 of an inch. After you've made those marks, you'll take these pieces back over to the drill press and drill the holes out at those new marks, and then later on when you put the pieces back together, now the holes are misaligned, and that's how this joint works. It's important when you're picking out your dowels or making dowels that you're using really straight grained wood, because when you're pounding those dowels in later on, if it's not straight and at an angle, there's a good chance that that could break right off halfway through pounding it down and you have a big mess on your hands. I round the edges of my dowels and I slope the holes on the tenons to help reduce the risk of anything breaking when I'm pounding these two joints together. Now this joint doesn't need glue, but I always like putting glue on there anyway, and with a mortise and tenon joint, it's always really important to add glue to the mortise and not just the tenon. When you're putting the tenon into the mortise, almost a squeegee action can happen where if you have a really tight fitting joint, you'll push all the glue on the tenon up and out of the joint. So make sure that you put glue inside the mortise and not just on the tenon. And now here's the fun part, actually pounding the joint together. And you can see how that joint gets pulled together when I pound those pegs in there. It worked beautifully, and that thing is super strong. This saw I have isn't a true flush cut saw, so what I did to prevent marring up the surface was I just found a piece of junk mail and laid it down, and it was just enough to keep the saw off the wood, and it didn't cut it straight to the wood, but nothing that a few passes on the plane doesn't take care of in a couple seconds. Well everyone, there you have it, the DRAWBORE Mortise and Tenon. It's an awesome joint, and I hope you guys start incorporating that into your woodworking as well. Make sure you stay tuned and subscribe to the channel. I'm going to be also doing a video on these through tussed mortise and tenon joints, and the tops will be a through wedged mortise and tenon. So I'm going to do a video on all of those, and I'm also doing a video of this entire bookshelf. So if you're interested in seeing how this turns out, check the description. or there might be links here at the end. All right, thanks so much for watching. Have a good day.